I'm Hannah Woolmer, concert violinist and founder of the WMG in Thurrock. Today I'm going to be talking about exam preparation and competition preparation, but we're probably going to focus more on exam because there's a lot more components to it. But please feel free to put all this preparation towards any public recital, competitions, and I really hope it's very informative for you. So there's many different exam boards. There's the two major ones are ABRSM and Trinity, and they run in the UK and abroad. And often I think the tendency is for people and for parents possibly and pupils to want to push for exams and to then not necessarily know what they should be working towards, but want to keep themselves moving forward as they see it. And so they will often perhaps enter exam and time after time get perhaps just a pass, or scraping into that pass, and straight away they want to go on to the next exam. And what I'm talking to you today about is getting the best results possible for you and your child. So let's talk about first of all what an exam is made up of. Whatever exam board you do, they tend to have 3 different pieces that you'll have to play. On the Trinity exam board, there's also, you can compose your own piece, which I recommend doing from the start because it's a great skill to have, and while you're doing these exams you might as well get the most out of them. Whether it's just for fun composing, you'll become a great composer as you go, but you could also use this for GCSE, for A-levels, for degree eventually, so you never know. So while that component is on the exam, I would recommend doing it from the very first exam. There's also technical exercises, and on ABRSM this is scales and arpeggios, and on Trinity you have the option of doing studies or the scales and arpeggios leading up to grade 5. After that I believe you have to do both of them. Then there's supporting tests. For both exam boards you have oral training, you also have sight reading, but on the Trinity exam there's also the option of improvisation and musical knowledge, and you get to choose 2 out of the 4. So today, because there's a little bit more to the Trinity exams and more choice, we're going to focus on Trinity exams, but the advice can go again for any exam board. What I also like about the Trinity exam board is the way they break down their mark scheme, so any parent, child, teacher can see how to get the best out of the exams. So what we're really aiming for when we do any exam, we should all be aiming for distinction. We shouldn't enter exam hoping for a scrape through pass. We want to be able to, and we should have the self-belief that we want to get distinction. We won't always get distinction. Sometimes it'll be a merit and sometimes it'll be a pass, but really you shouldn't be looking at doing an exam when you don't know the criteria or not able to even attempt to get a distinction. So I've got my exam criteria here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get that distinction, how to get those top marks. And I'm really focusing on today the playing aspect. Keep tuned and subscribe to see how I talk about the supporting tests and other things. We're talking about playing today. So on the Trinity exam board, the mark scheme is put down, broken up to fluency and accuracy, technical facility and communication and interpretation. So fluency and accuracy, there's 7 marks there, so it's 7 marks for technical facility and 8 marks for communication and interpretation. So on this particular exam board they put the most emphasis on who you are as a player, how you communicate to the audience. 7 marks for fluency and accuracy, that's how well you know the piece. And technical facility is how well you can control your instrument, so you have a great tone, so you have great intonation, and so any performance markings that are there, you can perform those. So really the communication and interpretation, though it's the larger mark out of the 3, you can only really communicate and interpret the piece if you have the technical grounding and you have the fluency and accuracy. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. Fluency and accuracy, I think that's pretty obvious. So 1 to 2 marks would be little or no sense of fluency. Control of pulse rhythm was not established. So that's a basic thing. If you can't play in time, you're really down there. If you don't know the piece, you shouldn't really be looking into doing an exam of that standard at that time. Where we get to the pass mark, we're around about a general reliable sense of fluency, though some inconsistencies and stumbles. So you will be passing if you can basically play that piece, if you've got a pulse. You've kept it in time, but you know, you made some errors. Getting up to the higher marks now, into the merits, you need a good sense of fluency. That means you're playing whole piece pretty much fluently all the way through, no real problems, one or two little tiny slips. A very good sense of fluency with only momentary insecurities. That will be nerves on the day, and you get the full 7 marks if pretty much nothing went wrong there. However, many people enter exam and they're at the 7 marks for fluency and accuracy, yet they don't get distinctions and they don't get merits, they get straight through passes. And that's because there's more to playing, oops, that's my violin, music than just making sure you know that piece. People call that, oh, they're very technical. I wouldn't. Technique is not knowing a piece inside and out. We're going to get onto technique now. So lots of people say, oh, it's a very technical, oh, they play very technically, but I don't like the sound they make. Well, they don't actually play technically. It means they spent a lot of time learning the piece. Now we're going to get on to technique. Now, obviously, I'm a violinist. I hope some of my advice can help other instruments out as well. But for violin, the big bugbear and the thing that we work on from day one in the WMG is the tone. So from the first time you pick your violin up, oh, I'm fuzzing a bit here, learning how to hold the bow. So we're going to go over this bow hold, and if you are not sure of your bow hold, or if you're holding it a little bit incorrectly, before even the initial test, this is what we have to work out. So thing we do, lots of people do it, is the bunny rabbit hold. That's 2 fingers and a thumb, nice and curled. Also another thing, your hand hanging from your wrist. Your wrist normally, most of the time on the bow, is going to be one of the higher parts of your arm. See my elbows, just nice and loose. Okay, so we bring that in there, and that first joint there, that's where your bow is going to sit, and your thumb just goes behind. Now, this one flops there, this one flops here. When you're at the heel of the bow, most of the way at the bow, you're holding it with these fingers, but most of the way at the bow is here in the little finger. And when you're at the point of the bow, a lot of the weight is there. But all the time holding it, so anyone with these fingers sticking out, we're not going to have a good tone. Same time, the tendency is always just to lean on there. And we're going to talk about how that affects tone. Just leaning on the index finger creates this kind of sound. To different degrees. I mean, it also means you can't string change that well. You can't actually smooth string change because you have to be pulling it with your 2 middle fingers. I'm just going to move up a bit so you can see how my fingers control. So before we even do initial tests, that's what you want to work on. Why do we want to work on that? I mean, you know, when you just want to get through those exams, play harder and harder and harder pieces, well, let's look at the mark scheme. 1 to 2 marks. Many or all of the technical demands of the music were not managed. There were significant flaws in the tone control. So you've worked really hard, you know your pieces, you think you're ready for that exam, even initial test. However, you play your piece like this. Not going to be great. That's going to be low on the mark scheme. So at the moment you're looking at 7 marks on fluency and accuracy, but 1 or 2 marks on tone. So supposing you've got 2 marks, that's 9 marks there. That's also going to bring down your communication and interpretation to perhaps 5 marks. So you get a maximum of 14 marks. That's a scrape through pass. Again, if you're perhaps holding it without the other fingers, you could be playing like this. And you can't balance it on 1 string. Right down there. So working on this bow hold, and this is what we do in every lesson, but please, parents, make sure and encourage your children at home. If you're not a musician yourself, the best thing to do is, how does that sound to you? That question asked all the time, reminding the people to listen. And though, yes, they're working on getting more and more pieces right and harder pieces, how does it sound? Would you want to listen to it? And not in a mean way, but just, you know, remind them to listen to the tone. So something more along these lines. That's getting you up along the various technical demands of the music were fulfilled with only momentary insecurities. So we're getting around the 6 marks there. So we've got 7 6 marks. And again, if you've got that control of the instrument, suddenly that piece is from the initial test from Trinity, and it's called Waterfall. So by being able to use that beautiful tone straight away, stylistically, I'm communicating that across the audience. So that's getting into distinction marks straight away. Yes, I know I'm an adult, I'm a professional musician, but it's something we should all be aiming for. So really what we want to really hear from even the youngest pupil is a tone that's consistent with their teacher. Yes, they can't play all the notes that a teacher plays. Yes, they can't vibrato. Yes, they can't do a wide range of things or play difficult pieces, but at the standard they're at, they should be aiming for that top quality tone with the bow. And I'd say for violinists, about 90% of the marks, when they don't get the mark they thought they should, and they know the piece, they didn't make any mistakes in the exam, but they didn't get that mark, it's because of bow control. Consistently working on bow control all the time. Another thing is, many people feel that you should be pushing into an instrument, and that creates a strong sound. But we should actually be using the natural weight of our arm to sit into the bow, and then we should be using our fingers and wrist to pull the bow. And the arm itself, we're not moving from the shoulder, we're moving from the elbow. Then finally, intonation. That's something that needs to be worked on. Sometimes children have stickers, sometimes they don't, and they should be removed as they go along, and we gradually remember where our fingers goes. However, a good tip here is it's not a rigid thing, intonation. As we move up the violin for later grades, our fingers get closer together. We shouldn't be looking all the time where they go. And a good thing to do is, many people play with this sort of rigid hand position. Locking your fingers like that means there's no wiggle room whatsoever. And we love the wiggle room. We love the grey area. So a nice natural curve from our fingers, fingernails facing towards the face, as opposed to trying to do the splits with your fingers. That's it, that way. And by placing them flat like that, you have a lot of wiggle room. Each joint is able to move and just minutely move the finger into tune. So following those pieces of advice would really bring your playing up, whether it's exam, competition, even audition, from a pass mark to a merit to a distinction. So if we're looking through, another thing that all our teachers at WMG do is they work through the exam mark scheme, and we start pinpointing the weaker areas for each child. Each week, and at home we can do this, we start working on those so that perhaps they can play their piece fluently and accurately. Perhaps they have great technical control, but perhaps they refuse to play any dynamics whatsoever with any sort of communication or interpretation, and so they're down on a 1 or 2 mark from that point of view. Just each time they're practicing, working on the dynamics or the communication, just to bring them up a mark or 2. So by the time they hit the exam, it's not this idea of practicing week after week after week, bang away, mindless practicing. They've got something to focus on that's very precise in their practice and their lessons. Again, with the scales and arpeggios, we'll talk about the playing there. They're a big letdown often for pupils. Using all the technical ingredients that I've just spoken about will really help you with those scales and arpeggios. The memorization of the scales and arpeggios, that's going to be purely as time goes on. You will get to know it a bit more. A good thing to do when you learn your scales and arpeggios, though, is learn the keys that go with them. Learn what that key looks like, because those scales and arpeggios are there so that when you play a piece of music, you can look at a key and go, oh, that's where my fingers go. So from day one, learning how to read a key, your teacher teaches you, but practice it in your own spare time. And that is great news and the key to success in your exams as far as playing goes. Subscribe to this channel, join the WMG on Facebook, and make sure you stay tuned for more instructional videos on how to be the best you can be at an instrument, any standard. Thank you very much.